Hello, hi everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Can you
If
hear
you,
him?
yep, if you cannot hear me, just raise your hands. Okay. Hi everyone. My name is Guang. I'm here speaking to you about poetry appreciation, mostly because I'm a writer. I'm a poet. And I think one of the things that I want to leave with you guys today is that thinking about poetry, writing about poetry, feeling stuff about poetry, all these things are are not scary, right? A lot of people think that because it's slightly more unfamiliar, it's slightly more academic, perhaps like it's in a classroom setting that you're seeing this, therefore it is a bit more difficult. But actually, I think it's quite simple, and hopefully you'll see why in a bit. So perhaps to speak a little bit more about myself, here I have given like there's a little slideshow of like random things I have done over the course of I guess, my career as a writer. But all of this is just to kind of explain that everything starts from my love of writing and reading. So I don't really, in a sense, all these things are things that came later. And my first love, I guess, is just writing and also reading. And to me, I think it's quite interesting in Singapore that a lot of people like to write, a lot of people like to say they write, but very few or even less people say they enjoy reading and also talking about reading, right? So this is a problem that a lot of Singapore writers face, that they don't find enough people to read their work. They don't find enough people to talk about their work after it's been read. And so session hopefully is a little bit of a taster to get you guys to see, what reviewing looks like, how easy actually it is, how simple it is, and how potentially enjoyable it can be. Okay, so I want to start very quickly with a little exercise. I want you guys to take out writing materials. In this case, I think I'll be okay with you using your phone as a writing material if you use it and kind of type something on the notes app. All I need you to do is to think about this question. The question is, what did you last recommend to a friend? So we all like or dislike things, right? And we all have, we all have our reasons why. So I want you to think about something that you recommended that you liked, right? And that you asked a friend to also check out, right? Be it food, a dish or a stall, be it a book, a show, a band, a music track, or even something that you bought online. Like if you bought something from like Lazada and you thought it was really good, right? Think about that question. Don't write anything yet. Just think about that question. And further to that, also think about why did you bother to tell someone that you liked it, and how did you try to persuade your friends or your family to also like the same thing. Okay. So keeping all these questions in mind, in your free writing, I want you to answer the questions in a very specific way. Right. The important thing is that in this piece of free writing, which I'll give you a time limit for, you guys should keep writing and not stop writing. Right. You just write in full sentences about the question that I just asked. I'll explain it again later. At this point in time, you don't have to worry about grammar and spelling. You don't have to worry that you're not making sense. And also, do not stop writing. The idea is that you must keep your hand on your phone screens, or keep your pencil to the page for as long as possible without stopping. If you blank out, if you get lost, just write blah 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 until you regain your train of thought. Right. So the aim of the exercise is to write as long, as much as possible without stopping. Okay, so the question again is, what did you last recommend to a friend? Why did you bother to do this? How did you persuade your friend or your family members perhaps to also like the same thing? Okay, so it's about 2.5 minutes. So it's about half time. For those who have finished, I want you to think about the opposite of this question. When was the last time you really disliked something and you wanted to tell your friends or your family to avoid it and not to use it, not to look at it, not to listen to it? And the same questions, why did you want to say that? and how did you try to persuade? So time is up. So I think what I would like to hear from actually is some responses. I don't need to read your responses, but if you guys, some of you could volunteer to kind of explain what you guys wrote. So you don't have to read it out word for word because it could be, you know, stream of consciousness. It could not make sense, but when you speak it out, then I'll be able to hear. So could I have some volunteers to tell me a bit about what, you know, what you guys wrote about?
Hello, Mr. Hokang. I'm Bastian.
Hello.
Yeah. Hello.
Can I tell you what your poem is? Yeah. So what your
I was supposed to write a poem.
what your written paragraph is about?
My written paragraph is about video game. Yes.
What video game is this?
R6.
Why did you recommend it? What's so good
Very
about
fun game. Very good. Very calming to your nerves.
it? Okay. So how did you tell your friend that they should play this game?
I said, hey, buy the game.
And did your friend listen to you and actually buy it?
One did.
Okay. So I'm assuming that some might have heard you and decided not to buy it, or decided not to listen to you.
Yes, because there are no money.
Okay, but if you think that if they all had money, they would totally buy this game.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Hello, my name is Ilyas.
Hello.
Okay. My topic was about a song I like, so I shared it with my friend by making him listen to it. Like I forced him to listen to it, and
Okay.
he immediately liked it. So
Okay. Why did you like the song? Could you explain a bit?
it puts you in a trance, like in another world.
Okay.
Like, very, melodic.
Okay, fantastic. Okay. So your friend liked it as well, lah.
Yes, a lot.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks. Thank you.
Ivan.
Okay, so I'm sure that all of you have similar similar experiences of liking something and wanting to share it with a friend, right? The reason I asked you to do this exercise actually is because all of us like things and dislike things for different reasons, right? And we also like, as human beings, we like to share what we like and dislike to other people, right? We say, go and listen to this song, go play this video game. And we like to tell people about why, or even if we don't really know how to say why, you say, just listen to it. And then we, like Ilya said, force their friends to listen to it. And then when they actually hear it, they make up their own minds, right? So poetry reviewing is actually very similar to this idea of recommending something that you like or you dislike, right, to other people. It just has a slightly different vocabulary, a different structure, but at the heart of it, it's very similar to why you like a chicken rice from this stall and why you want to share it with your friends, right? So I think one of the difficulties is we think poetry is very hard to understand. It's very hard to if you can't even understand it, how do we like or dislike it, right? And then if you don't even know whether we like or dislike it, how do we share it with friends? So I'm going to give you a little bit of an example of how to perhaps understand poetry, how to feel about it, what to feel about it, how to think about it, and perhaps how to share it with others. So I would like one volunteer to read this poem out to the class. I'm hoping you guys can see that the font is large enough. And after reading it out, I will kind of talk you guys through how to understand this poem. Okay.
The stars are soft as flowers, and as near the hills are webs of shadow. Slowly spun, no separate leaf or single blade is here, all blend to one. No moonbeam cuts the air, a sapphire light rolls lazily and slips again to rest. There is no edge sting in all this night. Safe in my breast.
Okay, thanks a lot. So this poem is called Midnight. This poem is called Midnight. And when I read this poem for the first time, as I was looking for poems to share, immediately, I don't know if you guys can see this, but because it's called midnight, it already gives you a certain kind of feeling, right? This is nighttime. This is dark, right? But this isn't just a darkness that in which you can't see anything. You actually can see things, just that they're all really blurry, right? So what I saw when I read this poem was a lot of blurriness, right? The stars are soft as flowers, which means that the flowers that you see, right in front of you, look like stars that are really far away. So the far things and the near things are all kind of collapsed into one, right? Hills, which are normally really, large, really high, they become webs of shadow, like a spider's web, which is really soft, really near, right? So everything that is far becomes near, everything that's large becomes small. And so the third line, when it says no separate leaf or single blade is here, all blend to one, that kind of reinforces my idea that everything in this midnight scene is kind of blurred together. You can't really make out things. You can see indistinct shapes, but you can't really make out, the immediate outlines of anything, right? So this is what I see. Okay, and from what I see, actually quite naturally, it flows into what I feel. Imagine if you wake up in the middle of the night in a place that you do not know, and everything, you can't really see things, you can only see shapes, you can make out shapes. Actually, to me, it's kind of frightening or worrying, right? I get a little bit confused, I get a little bit anxious. So the blurriness of this night actually makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable because I can't really distinguish where I am. I'm not really sure whether if I take a step, I'll fall into this big hole or not because I can't see anything, right? And I also feel quite small, right? I don't know how, who is out there. I don't know what is surrounding me. And so I feel small, I feel a little bit frightened perhaps. Well, perhaps not me, but I think that the person who wrote this poem probably feels that way, right? So it seems quite natural then in the last few lines of the poem when this writer says, there's no edged thing in all this night save in my breast. In this case, breast refers to the chest, refers to an emotion that is inside the person, right? Not actually to a physical, a physical aspect. So this edge thing, right? There's no edge thing except in my breast suggests that the poet is actually feeling something quite, feeling anxious, feeling worried, feeling a sort of emotion that is on edge, right? The poet is feeling on edge. And this contrasts with the blurriness outside. But in fact, it's the blurriness that's causing the poet to feel uncomfortable, right? So that seems to me, right, to be the emotional aspect of this poem. And it seems quite natural for the writer to feel this way. So I guess to reflect on what I just said, there are three parts to this response that I want you to pay close attention to, right? The first thing is, what do I see when I read a poem? What am I able to see? How do the words form images in my mind, and what are these images, right? So in this case, the images are the stars compared with the flowers, the hills compared with the shadows, no leaf, no blade, and also this edginess that is in the poet, right? The second part of it is, what do I feel, right? So given that I can see the poem or see what's happening in the poem, how do I respond to it? How do I feel? And so I thought I would feel uncomfortable. I would feel disoriented, right? I would feel a bit frightened perhaps. And this is the interesting part about reactions to poetry or even to anything, right? Another person could look at the same things or see the same things in the poem and feel quite differently. They might say, actually, I'm not afraid of the darkness. I'm quite comfortable being in a place where I can't really figure out anything. I wouldn't feel frightened. In fact, I would feel excited. So I think that the edge thing is excitement because I'm now in a new place that I can explore, right? So this is a completely different answer to what do I feel, but it's entirely, it entirely makes sense because this person can say, I feel excited when I am in a new place, when I can, I feel a sense of adventure and so on, right? So the important thing to note about what I feel is that there's no real right answer to this. And as long as you can kind of explain why based on what you see, most personal responses are quite acceptable, right? So that's the second part. What do I feel? And then the third part, which actually, I say first, second, third, but it may not come in that order. It might come in quite a different order. But the third part to this is which lines or words made me feel that way, right? So this is analysis evidence, right? In a more classroom, in classroom speak, this analysis evidence, right? So why do I feel frightened? I feel frightened because I can't make out the shapes of things, right? I can't even make out the shapes of my own hands versus, a leaf or a tree. And that makes me quite anxious, right? So if I can identify which lines or words made me feel the way I feel, that is essentially your analysis and evidence. And this can come last, it can come first, right? You can start off by saying, I feel frightened, and then you explain why. Or you can say, these are the lines, and therefore they make me feel frightened. Okay, so three parts. What do I see? What do I feel? And which lines or words made me feel that way? Right. So essentially, that's what's going on in a poetry review. Okay. Okay. So I'm now showing a different poem, but to me, I think it's a poem that has a similar vibe, I guess, to the poem that I shared. And what I want you guys to do is individually look at this poem, read this poem. I think you also have it as a printout. And think about the same three questions, or rather, for now, for this next 10 minutes, just think about the first two questions of the three steps that I mentioned, right? So the two questions are, what do you see and what do you feel when you read this poem? Don't think about explanations yet. Especially if you don't have any explanations, you don't need to explain yourself at this point. And kind of start writing down answers to these questions, right? When you read this poem, what do you see and what do you feel? So let me explain a bit more about what you see, right? When you read words, very often you have, they arouse thoughts in your mind, right? So you read the line, a shiny red apple. Most people who have imaginations can see a shiny red apple in their minds, even though the shiny red apple doesn't exist. It's just words on a page, right? So in the same way, poems, at least good ones, also arouse these images in your mind, right? And it's important to explain or to turn into words, right? That image back onto page, right? So the idea is that the poem gives you an image, and then you take the image and you write it back on the page, right? So that's what you see. I see, in the previous poem, I see blades of grass. I see a white field that is shrouded in darkness, things like that, right? And then the second question, what you feel, there are a few parts to it. One part is, what do you think the poet is feeling, or what do you think the speaker in the poem is feeling? And then what do you think about the poem, right? So there are emotions of the speaker, and there are also emotions of yourself, which might be the same, but they might also be different, right? So these are a bit more of the more advanced, complexities of this question, what do you feel? Okay, so for the next 10 minutes, I want you guys to write a personal response to this poem, just answering the questions, what do you see and what do you feel, without the need to explain yet. It's been about 5 minutes, so we're about halfway there. If you guys are stuck, try to kind of focus on the different nouns that you see inside the poem. Nouns meaning words that name things, right? So examples of this would be night, eyes, stars, road trip. Also, I think is a noun. And think about all these nouns, and this could inform your answer to what do you see. If you haven't finished, it's okay, but I just want to call for perhaps one or two people to present their responses, right? What do you see and what do you feel?
Hi. I saw a couple having an argument. It made me feel uncomfortable. The phrase was, "Give me a world, you have taken the world I was."
So I want to ask a bit more about your response, right? So it seems like so that last sentence or the last line that you quoted, you say that suggests that a couple is having an argument. Okay, could you explain more about how you thought that line showed the argument?
other phrase, kneeling by the roadside, you kind of thought about it's an interaction between two people, somewhat of a reunion between both people, and it's both of them talking to each other. This what the speaker in the poem uh, feeling sour in in some way, then makes that comment to tell the person by the roadside, "You done me bad," something like that.
Okay, that's a very interesting reading. Very interesting reading. Very different from what I had in mind, but I can see how you came to that conclusion. Okay, so I won't comment yet. Thank you very much for sharing. I want to hear someone else, and then I'll take it together.
But I read the poem as, so despite the poet's in love, but still sad, and that's okay. But they're getting there.
Okay. Could you explain more about why you thought this way?
Of the depiction of kneeling by the roadside with the toolkit, it's just that their love is like fixing something or other, helping to recover from whatever. Yeah.
Okay,
And,
yeah. So the idea that or the words that say toolkit and fixing suggest that something is spoiled, right? Something is broken, something is not perfect. Okay, yeah. Thanks a lot. Okay, so actually, really interesting. Two responses that are not entirely different, but are actually that are still somewhat different, right? But not entirely, right? Both the responses suggest that something is not quite right with this poem, or not quite right with the relationship between I and you. It seems like that's because the you is fixing something, which means that something is broken, right? And it seems like that has caused readers to feel, discomfort, caused readers to feel that perhaps the speaker is not, is conflicted, right? So in love, but also there's something, not entirely perfect about this love. Okay, so if you noticed, what I did was ask why, right? So when the two volunteers who very who shared the great responses came up and they gave what they wrote, I asked the following question: why do you think that way? And quite quickly, quite naturally, both of them were able to pinpoint certain things about the poem that kind of explained why they felt that way, why they thought that this was what was going on in the poem. In kind of the classroom setting, right? Their response to my question would be explanation and evidence, right? So tell me which part of the poem makes you think that, right? Then they point, okay, maybe it's the last line. Give me a world, you have taken the world I was, that suggests that they're having an argument. Or toolkit fixing something suggests that something's broken, right? Which is the explanation that was given by the second volunteer. Okay, so there's in this, I want you to see that there's a difference between giving a response and giving the explanation, right? So what do you see, what do you feel? These are two similar questions, right? It's just asking you for a personal response. But then the third part, which is evidence, analysis, explanation, all these things, right? That is when your literary skills come into play, right? And then you have to use certain, you have to point out certain words, point out certain lines. If you have done literature before, there's certain jargon that you can use, like rhyme, meter, all these things can be used to explain why you see what you see and why you feel what you feel. Okay. So let me talk a little bit about the poem and how it made, what I saw and what it made me feel before we move on to the next bit. Okay. So I chose this poem mostly because it surprised me a lot. It's not common for a love poem to talk about road trips, right? So this road trip is clearly not a physical road trip. It's clearly an emotional road trip, very similar to if you're called to give a presentation in front of 100 people and you feel like you're on an emotional roller coaster, right? So very similar, emotional road trip all over my mind and heart, right? The poet says. So this road trip is a psychic road trip, a psychological road trip. And in fact, it's not just it's beyond the psychological road trip, because it's also a cosmic road trip. In the second and third and fourth lines, you have the words, "Here you are coming along the stars." So this road trip also seems to be happening in like inside the poet, but the poet's thoughts and feelings are compared to a galaxy, right, along the stars. So to me, what I see is kind of like a magical intergalactic car driving along, the Milky Way, and this universe actually relates the universe of the poet's feelings, right? So I imagine the poet like standing there, a person, and then you zoom into their feelings, and actually inside of them is a huge galaxy, and inside that galaxy is a car driving around, right? So that seems to be, that's what I see when I see this poem, and so to me that makes me feel kind of amazed. It makes me feel like, wow, that within one person there's such a large universe of feelings and thoughts, right? Even though a human being is really small, but inside that human being is a whole galaxy of thoughts, emotions, feelings, and the feelings that this poet is feeling are so perhaps complicated, complex, so large perhaps that they are not, or that they're compared to a whole galaxy along the stars. And so the next part of the poem, which is the fixing stuff, right, makes me think, okay, there is something is not entirely right. It's true, but what I saw was how the you is fixing things, right? So fixing the emotions, fixing the issues, perhaps, fixing the things that are broken within the poet or the speaker. So to me, I saw this as a repair job, right? Not that the relationship is broken, but that the poet's feelings and emotions are somehow broken, and therefore the you has taken the broken bits and is trying to fix it, right? So to me, that's how I understand the last line. You have taken the world that I was, right? Imagine the poet is a whole galaxy, right? It's a whole universe, it's a whole world, and there's certain parts of it that are broken. So the you, the fixer, right, takes this broken thing and is fixing it, right, and then eventually has to return it, right? So you have taken this whole broken thing. Now I'm waiting for you to fix it and return it back to me. So that's how I see what's going on. And to me, it's quite sweet, in a way. Like, to me, I saw that, I read this poem in a much more positive way than the two volunteers who came up and spoke. But I was also quite convinced, when the two of them were talking about the conflict and the things that were not quite right within this poem. And I thought that the explanations were quite convincing, and it made me think, okay, actually, you're right. It's not as positive a poem as I thought it was. And perhaps that explains, the question that I asked at the start, which is, why is the title like that, right? Why is love called small and sad? Isn't this about a giant universe of feelings, right? Why is it small and sad? So maybe there's that aspect as well, that the I feels a bit cheated, that the you has that the I is so in love with the you and has given away the world of emotions and feelings to the you. And so the you has all the power to fix things or not to fix things, right? To return or not to return the world. And that makes it a little bit sad. That makes it a little bit conflicting. So yeah, so thanks a lot for the volunteers who actually made me see this poem in a slightly different light. And I think what I, the reason I went into such detail in this poem is because I wanted to very explicitly talk about the explanations, talk about the evidence and analysis, right? So all the things that I said could, had things to back them up, right? When I say, okay, what I saw was a road trip in a galaxy, right? Like a intergalactic road trip. The reason I say that is because you do have the line saying I did a road trip, but it's not a road trip through like Malaysia, right? It's a road trip all over my mind and heart. And also you are coming along the stars. So my mind and heart is like a universe in the stars, right? So all of these are the explanations that I'm giving to you to get you to see what I see, right? And to show you that actually I'm not just a crazy person making things up, but actually everything comes from the poem. I see certain things, even if you may not see them, even though if you may see something different, right? So I think it's really important also that even as you share what you see and what you feel, it's important to get other people to understand why do you see the things you see? Why do you feel the things you feel? If not, everyone is just giving their opinions, and there's no kind of it's very difficult for another person to share the same feelings and thoughts unless everyone sees and feels things in exactly the same way, which never happens, right? So that's the importance of using evidence and using analysis and explaining why you see things the way you see and why you feel things the way you feel. So this last bit of this practice, I want you guys to either pair up or go into groups of 3 just with the person next to you, and try to help the other person or the other persons see what you see and feel what you feel, right? So try to explain, try to provide evidence for why you see things the way you see, why do you feel things the way you feel, and like just kind of have a conversation about the poem with your friend. Through this, you get a little bit of practice explaining yourself to others, without having to worry who is more right or less right at this point.
So one interesting response I heard was from over here. This boy saying that it sounds like the couple's on a rocky road, right? Another response I heard, I think from Brian's side, is that the lesson they learn is don't go on road trips because something always break, right? And another person shared that one interesting idea is that when you're in a car, it's a small universe because it's just you and the other person, no one else in the 4 walls. So it's very private, very secluded. Maybe that's why they say it's like a world among themselves. Okay, so some very interesting ideas over there. Right.
Thanks. Yeah, that's really interesting. I think one of the one of the responses he shared about road trips, don't go on road trips because something might break, right? That's really interesting to me because I see the road trip again as an emotional journey, right? So falling in love, perhaps having arguments, these are all emotional journeys as well, right? And these are the emotional road trips that the poem is talking about. So it seems like that group that shared that is also kind of saying don't ever or be careful of going on emotional road trips because something bad will happen, right? So it seems like that is a kind of a warning against being too involved with the emotions because then you might get hurt, right? So to me, that is an interesting response to this poem. Okay, so I hope that you guys get a sense of what I'm looking for when I talk about reviewing poems, right? So you don't actually, the heart of reviewing poems really is what you see, what you feel, right? What made you think that way, right? And so with that, armed with that, I guess that knowledge, this lens of thinking about things, I want you guys to then apply this to the competition poems that your teachers are either going to hand out or have already handed out. And to form into groups to do this, I think I'll need the teacher's help to form them into the appropriate number of groups and the appropriate kind of groups. I would suggest 2 to 3, but if you prefer a larger group, that's okay as well. Yeah, so essentially what I want you guys to do is to ask and answer these 3 questions, right? What do you see in your mind when you read the competition poem? What does it make you feel? And which lines of words make you feel that way? So exactly the same thing that we've been doing for the past hour or so, but applied to these competition poems.
Okay. Well, I'm going to show my screen. Okay. So this is Elias and Bennett. Okay, can I get Elias and Bennett, can I get one of you over here just to talk about what you wrote? You think the poem is roughly about?
It's about family, I guess. And like the evidence I found there, which can be seen, it refers to the bonds between relatives across the sea, and how they and how I can't put it in words.
How they are connected.
Yeah, how they're bonded, how they're closely bonded to each other, and the love isn't like it isn't just blood. It's more than blood. It's like I don't know. I don't know how to put family love into words.
What?
Like family love, like I don't know how to like describe it and like elaborate on it.
So maybe I'll jump in a bit. So you identified family and like
Listen to how Harper breaks down what he just wrote.
okay, hi Ilyas. Yeah, sorry, you are Ilyas, right? Not Bennett.
No, Bennett.
Oh yeah, Bennett. I'm sorry. Yeah, so you've identified, I think, quite correctly that this poem is about family. You get some of the evidence that you used here, roots grown together, um, uh, to kind of identify family with roots, right? So the family seems to be uh, the idea of family seems to be compared to plants, to trees, to different kinds of plants and trees that all have roots that sink deep into the ground, right? So there's a certain aspect of family that you can see in the surface. There are also aspects of the family that you can't see that's under the ground. So I think that's maybe why you say it's not easy to talk about family love, because sometimes these things are not seen. These are roots that are invisible to perhaps people outside of the family. So I haven't actually read the whole poem yet because it's a pretty long poem. But even in the first few lines, you see you see evidence of that, right? So the first line goes, "Tonight around this flowering tree, you've called forth." And the second line, "A family from across every sea. What draws us, not greed but love." Blah blah blah, right? So it goes on to talk about the descriptions of these different families that are scattered around the world. So it seems like there is this very strong sense of the image of the family is like a tree, and essentially everything else is an elaboration of that, right? What kind of tree is it? Where does it grow, right? There are these like references to places like Chennai and Changi. Yeah, and also the descriptions of love and family love. So I think you guys have the right, like you guys have the right start, and I believe that with more time, and with more kind of reflection of the poem, you'll be able to write I guess a longer review that goes into the details, right? So what beyond family as a tree, what kind of family is being talked about here? What are the thoughts of the poet about family? What are the very complicated, I think, and complex emotions that the poet feels about his or her family?
All right. Yeah, you can see on my screen.
I think the poem is about the challenges and difficulties as well as the experiences of marriage.
Challenges, difficulties, experiences of marriage.
Yeah, could you explain why you say that?
The poem describes what the poet speaks of marriage as like very coldly explains that it's not just happy, it can be very sad. There's also some regret involved. There's a lot of complexities involved in it, which shows that love isn't just like a happy thing.
Okay. So how did I guess my question is, the first group looked or saw this poem as being about family love, and then you guys are talking about it as marriage love. I think also because you picked up on the line, your union's a complex matrix of geography, time zones, and I think both of you or both groups are in a way both are correct, right? Because once you get married to somebody else, like you also become a family. Yeah. So it seems like you guys are talking about the poem in this case more from the point of view of the union of two people, right? Whereas the first group talks about in a larger sense how two families are coming together across the sea, right? So that's I think both readings are correct, and actually I'm quite I think it's quite impressive that you guys actually managed to write this much within 10 minutes on a poem that I'm not even sure whether you guys have read prior to today. Perhaps you could tell me a bit more about what you felt.
How much does one device cost?
Right. So not just what the poem is about, but what do you feel about this poem? Did you did you enjoy it? Did you think that do you think that the poet expressed his or her emotions well in this poem?
I think the poet expressed emotions well. It was like really deep and interesting and complex.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Anything more? Why do you think it's interesting or deep or complex? Yeah.
You read it like, I don't know how to explain. You get like this sense that this isn't just any other text. It's very, also the content in it is also quite very down to earth.
Okay. So I mean, what I'm hearing also is that there's a lot of there seems to be a lot of description. That's what you're talking about, right? Like, there's suckling pig, there's orchids, all these like details that are in the poem that that allow you to see what's going on, and it's not about like airy fairy like love in the abstract, but something that is very concrete that you can actually see, perhaps even taste if you're talking about abalone and suckling pig and things like that. Okay. Okay, thanks a lot. Thank you. Perhaps you can have one more group to share, because I think it'll be interesting to hear a third group.
So, our plan is Adit. Adit, please tell me what poem you chose and what you thought about it.
So, we choose the poem CSG. And we feel that it's like a representation of how Singapore has grown through the years and become a very important country in Asia, and being home for many residents.
Why do you say it's interesting? Like what lines in particular do you find interesting?
Like the line like still evolving through challenges shows that Singapore is like perseverance and resilience throughout like difficult times.
Okay, so you kind of agree with that, lah, right? I assume that you have patriotic feelings that that you agree with in the poem. Okay, thanks a lot. Thank you. So I think I just want to quickly. So my assumption, if I'm correct, is that these poems have just been encountered by the students, right? They just read the poems like a while ago.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah. Okay. And essentially all these responses are the immediate responses, right, to the poems on the spot. Okay, so what I would say from the three groups that I heard is that actually, you guys are getting more sensitized, more sensitive to what a poem is trying to say, what a poem is trying to do. I would say that these poems are all quite complex poems. They are certainly more complex in the two examples that I shared earlier, and longer as well, slightly longer. And even though you guys only had 10 to 15 minutes to talk about them, already you see some ideas and thoughts coming up, right? Already you can kind of quite accurately pick up what is the main overarching theme of this poem, whether it is like love, whether it's family, whether it's about progress in Singapore. And so what I want to say is trust your instincts, right? Don't worry too much about whether you are right or wrong when you first encounter a poem, especially when it's a review, because the point of the review isn't really to show off how smart you are or to score a lot of points, but essentially the review is to share with someone else why you think a poem is good or not good, whether you liked it or didn't like it, right? So it's very much your personal response, and therefore it is important to trust your instincts as to why you like something, why you don't like something. And I think to get you guys to if you have more time, and I think you will have more time and more opportunities to look at the poems again, and to spend more time with the poems. Sometimes when you reread poems, new thoughts, you see new things, you feel new things, and then you can kind of also have the words at your fingertips to explain why these new things appeared to you and why you felt differently about something that you saw before, perhaps. So I believe that given more time and given more more space to think about these poems, you guys will actually start to have pretty decent reviews. Even the kind of starting paragraphs that I saw in all three examples suggested to me that you guys are able to pick up on what the poems are trying to say and what the poems are trying to do in terms of how they provoke you to feel certain things. Yeah. I would also kind of encourage you guys to to be comfortable with disagreeing or disliking things in the poems. It's the first step, I guess, is to identify what you like, but also to be unafraid to say which parts of the poem you thought were not were boring, were cliche, that didn't that would try to convey something, but it didn't speak to you, right? So it might be that you are not the that someone else might find a certain line very interesting, but you might have thought that this line was too complicated or it didn't speak to you. And that is also part of your what it made you feel, right? And what you saw or failed to see. And these things are also very important to put in your review. It's not an entirely honest review if you don't include things that you also felt could be improved or things that you felt were no good at all. Yeah, so that's another thing that I want to say. Okay, so I think if you guys forget everything in this workshop, the only thing that I want you to remember is a review is made of 3 parts. It's really simple. It doesn't have to be hundreds of words. The 3 things that we have talked about this whole session are: what do I see, or a summary of the poem, of the thing that you're reviewing; what do I feel, which is a personal response. The personal response can include things like what you think the poet is feeling, or the speaker is feeling. It can include what you liked about the poem. It could include also what you disliked or even hated about the poem. And the third part, which lines or words made me feel that way. Essentially, what is your evidence? How do you explain the things that you see and feel, right? So this is all there is to a review in a way, right? A review can be 1 sentence long if you can combine all these 3 things into 1 sentence somehow. It can be pages long, right? And reviews can also take the form of like speech, right? You can be talking to your friend about a poem and saying, I see this, I feel this, and this is why, right? So all these things constitute reviews. I think for the competition, what your teachers are looking at are written reviews, right? Which means that they need to be a little bit more formal, but nonetheless, they still need to have these 3 important aspects that any of these 3 aspects can't be missing in any review, right? So it's important to remember what you see, what you feel, and what lines or words make you feel that way. I think another thing that I would like to add is oftentimes reviewers actually review entire books, not just single poems. So this, of course, takes a little bit more practice, a little bit more experience, and a lot more time to read a whole entire book, to think about, okay, what is a whole book trying to say? A book of like 50 poems, what's the whole book trying to say? Certain poems make me feel this way, other poems make me feel another way. How do I understand this whole thing? Right? But often when you go online and you type book reviews, you'll find, or reviews of literature, you'll find that people actually review entire books. They review entire life's work, right? So if a writer has written 10 books, right, a review might actually say, okay, all 10 books, let's go and review that. Okay, so, but that's not what we need to do today. We kind of start small and build from there. But just to let you know that in the world of literature, reviews often take the form of book reviews, reviews of multiple books at once. All these things are things that you will find if you go online and look for them. Just to kind of give you can take pictures of this, just to give you a sense. If you guys want to read more reviews, especially reviews of Singapore books, here are a few places that you can read them. You can just take a picture of it, and I'll send your teachers links to these places. In fact, the Straits Times has quite a fair bit of local book reviews, in case you guys are wondering. Yeah, so I will send links to these places to your teachers afterwards. But yeah, here are a few places that you can find more reviews about Singapore, on Singapore books and topics. Yeah, so all I can say is that the state of reviewing in Singapore is small, because Singapore is quite a small place and there are not as many writers as a larger country, but it is growing. So more and more people are getting interested in literature. More and more people are getting interested in writing and reviewing. So I hope that this session has given you some, like, equip you to write reviews and to think about reviews. And I hope that you guys go away with a better understanding of how to read and how to write poetry. Yeah, that's all I have. Thank you very much. I think back to your teachers to wrap up.
Thank you so much, Hopper. Right, so I'll stop the recording.